They dismissed her ID and laughed until the computer voice announced Special Operations Command. This story begins at the Pentagon's most secure entrance on a busy Tuesday morning in November. Among the hundreds of military personnel, contractors, and government officials passing through security checkpoints was Captain Emma "Shadow" Walker, a 32-year-old officer whose unremarkable appearance and standard military ID gave no indication of her true role in America's most classified operations. But sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones who look the most ordinary. "Next," called out Staff Sergeant Tyler Jackson, a security checkpoint supervisor who had been processing Pentagon badges for 8 years. He had seen every type of clearance, every level of authority, and prided himself on immediately recognizing the important people who deserved expedited processing. Emma approached his station with a simple military ID that looked identical to thousands of others he processed daily. No special markings, no gold trim, no obvious indicators of high-level clearance. Just another mid-level officer trying to get into the building. "Ma'am, you'll need to use the standard visitor processing line," Jackson said without really looking at her. "This checkpoint is for essential personnel only." "I believe my clearance allows access through this checkpoint," Emma replied politely, extending her ID card. Sergeant Daniel "Tank" Brooks, Jackson's partner, glanced over and chuckled. "Lady, we process hundreds of people with higher clearance than you every day. Trust me, you're not essential personnel." Corporate security specialist Lisa Chen, who was observing the checkpoint as part of a Pentagon efficiency review, shook her head with amusement. "Some people really overestimate their own importance. I see this all the time. Junior officers who think their basic clearance gets them special treatment." But Emma remained patient, having encountered this exact situation dozens of times throughout her career. "If you could just scan the ID, I think you'll find everything is in order." Jackson took the card with obvious reluctance, clearly annoyed at having to waste time on what he assumed was a delusional junior officer. "Fine, but when this comes back as standard clearance, you're using the visitor line like everyone else." Jackson slid Emma's ID through the high-security scanner, expecting to see the standard clearance information that would allow him to redirect her to the appropriate checkpoint with bureaucratic satisfaction. Instead, his screen went completely black for several seconds before displaying a series of warnings and classifications he had never seen before. Classified access detected. Biometric verification required. Special compartmented information, need-to-know basis only. "What the hell?" Jackson muttered, staring at his screen in confusion. "Brooks, come look at this. The system is acting weird." Brooks moved over to check the display, but before he could read it, the computer's automated voice system activated, something that only happened for the highest levels of government clearance. "Access granted. Special Operations Command. Classification level, compartmented. Escort protocol, not required." The checkpoint fell silent. Jackson stared at his screen in disbelief while Brooks's mouth actually fell open. Chen, the security specialist, took a step closer with obvious shock. "I'm sorry, did that just say Special Operations Command?" Brooks asked, his voice much quieter than before. "Ma'am," Jackson said, his entire demeanor changed from dismissive to respectful. "I apologize for the delay. Your access is, well, it's above my clearance level to even discuss." But the surprises weren't over. Emma's ID had triggered additional security protocols that none of the checkpoint personnel had ever witnessed. Their supervisor's phone immediately rang with an automated alert, and within seconds, Lieutenant Colonel Mark Steele Harrison was walking rapidly toward their station. "Who just scanned a SOCOM access card?" Harrison demanded as he approached the checkpoint. Jackson pointed at Emma with obvious nervousness. "Sir, this officer. We thought she was trying to use unauthorized access." Harrison looked at Emma with immediate recognition and something approaching reverence. "Ma'am, I apologize for any inconvenience. If you need anything at all, please let me know immediately." Chen, the security specialist, was studying the interaction with professional fascination. "Excuse me, Colonel, but what exactly does Special Operations Command clearance mean?" Harrison looked at her with the expression of someone explaining quantum physics to a kindergartner. Ma'am, SOCOM clearance means this officer has access to operations and intelligence that most generals don't even know exist. She could probably order this entire facility evacuated if she felt it was necessary. Ma'am, Harrison continued, addressing Emma directly, should I have someone escort you to your destination? That won't be necessary, Colonel, Emma replied with the same calm professionalism she had maintained throughout the encounter. I'm just here for a routine briefing. But Jackson couldn't help his curiosity, even though he knew he was probably violating multiple security protocols. Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly do you do? I mean, I've been processing clearances for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like what just happened. Emma smiled politely. I'm afraid that's classified, Sergeant, but I can tell you that your security procedures worked exactly as designed. Brooks, who was still staring at the clearance display, shook his head in amazement. Ma'am, the system is showing classification levels I didn't even know existed. How long have you been in special operations? Long enough, Emma answered diplomatically. Chen, ever the professional, was already calculating the implications of what she had witnessed. This is incredible. You're telling me that someone with this level of clearance can just walk through any checkpoint in the Pentagon without question? Not just the Pentagon, Harrison explained. SOCOM clearance provides access to facilities and operations worldwide. This officer could walk into CIA headquarters, NSA facilities, or classified installations that don't officially exist. Jackson was beginning to understand the magnitude of his initial dismissal. Ma'am, I'm really sorry about earlier. I had no idea. Sergeant, you were doing your job exactly as you should, Emma reassured him. Security protocols exist for a reason, and you followed them perfectly. The fact that you questioned my access initially shows the system is working. But the revelations weren't finished. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's radio crackled with an incoming message that made everyone realize they were dealing with someone even more significant than they had imagined. Colonel Harrison, this is Pentagon Security Control. We show a Phoenix-level clearance activation at Checkpoint 7. Please confirm status. Harrison's eyes widened as he looked at Emma with new understanding. Phoenix level? Ma'am, are you... Emma's expression remained neutral, but her slight nod confirmed Harrison's suspicion. Holy shit, Brooks whispered, then immediately caught himself. Sorry, ma'am, but Phoenix clearance, that's like urban legend stuff. I heard it might exist, but I never thought... Chen, whose job involved understanding government security hierarchies, was struggling to process what she was witnessing. Could someone explain what Phoenix clearance means? Because I'm pretty sure it's not in any manual I've studied. Harrison looked around to ensure they weren't being overheard, then spoke in quiet, reverent tones. Phoenix clearance is theoretically the highest classification level in the U.S. government. It provides access to operations that are so classified they don't appear in any official documentation. We're talking about missions that would be denied even if someone had direct evidence of their existence. Jackson was beginning to understand why his casual dismissal of Emma had been so inappropriate. So when you say highest clearance, I mean higher than the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Harrison clarified. Higher than most cabinet members. Phoenix clearance answers directly to the president and maybe 3 other people in the entire government. Emma remained silent during this discussion, neither confirming nor denying the details being shared, but her presence was enough to validate everything Harrison was explaining. Brooks, who prided himself on recognizing important personnel, was re-evaluating everything he thought he knew about military hierarchies. Ma'am, have we been processing other officers with this level of clearance without knowing it? That would be classified information, Sergeant, Emma replied with a slight smile. But I can tell you that the people who need to remain unnoticed are usually very good at it. Chen was taking notes, recognizing that she was witnessing something that might never be documented anywhere else. This is fascinating from a security perspective. You're saying there are people with clearance levels so high that even acknowledging they exist is classified. Welcome to the world of special access programs, Harrison explained. There are operations happening right now that will never appear in any history book, conducted by people whose names will never be released, achieving objectives that officially never existed. Jackson looked at Emma with obvious awe. "Ma'am, what you do? It's like you're part of a shadow military that operates completely outside normal command structures." "Sergeant, what I do is serve my country in whatever capacity is required," Emma replied diplomatically. "Sometimes that service happens in ways that can't be publicly acknowledged." Harrison's radio crackled again with another message that elevated the situation even further. "Colonel Harrison, this is General Williams's office. We need immediate confirmation of Phoenix 77's location and status." Harrison nearly dropped his radio. "Phoenix 77? Ma'am, are you—" Emma's slight nod confirmed what Harrison suspected, but couldn't quite believe. "General Williams's office wants to know your status," Harrison said, his voice filled with something approaching awe. "Ma'am, you report directly to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs?" "Among others," Emma replied simply. Brooks was struggling to process the implications. "Wait, so when we were giving you grief about visitor processing, you were actually— you could have called the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and had this entire checkpoint shut down for security review," Harrison finished. "Yes, Sergeant, that's exactly what could have happened." Chen was frantically taking notes, recognizing that she was witnessing the exposure of command structures that weren't supposed to be publicly acknowledged. "This is incredible. You're telling me there are officers who operate with authority that supersedes normal military hierarchy?" "Ma'am," Harrison explained, "Phoenix-level clearance doesn't just provide access to classified information. It provides operational authority to take whatever actions are deemed necessary for national security, regardless of normal protocols or chain of command." Jackson was beginning to understand the full scope of his earlier dismissiveness. "So when I told you to use the visitor line, you were telling someone who could theoretically order the evacuation of this building to wait in line with tourists," Harrison said with obvious discomfort. Emma maintained her diplomatic composure throughout this revelation. "Sergeant, you were following proper security protocols. The fact that you didn't immediately recognize my authority shows that operational security is working as intended." But Brooks couldn't help pushing for more information. "Ma'am, without violating any security protocols, can you tell us anything about what kind of operations require this level of clearance?" Emma considered the question carefully before responding. "Let's just say that when conventional military and intelligence assets aren't sufficient to address certain threats to national security, there are alternative resources available." "Ma'am," Chen asked, "are you saying there are threats that our regular military can't handle?" "I'm saying that there are threats that our regular military can't be officially associated with handling," Emma clarified. "Sometimes protecting America requires actions that can never be acknowledged, conducted by people who can never be recognized." Harrison nodded in understanding. "Plausible deniability operations, actions so sensitive that even their existence must remain theoretical." Jackson was putting together pieces of a puzzle he never knew existed. "So there's an entire level of military operations that happens completely outside public knowledge? Sergeant, what do you think happens when America faces threats that can't be addressed through conventional diplomacy or acknowledged military action?" Emma asked. "Someone has to handle the problems that officially don't exist." Brooks's respect for Emma had evolved from dismissive annoyance to something approaching reverence. "Ma'am, how many people have clearance at your level?" "Fewer than you might think, more than you should know," Emma replied diplomatically. Chen was struggling to understand the implications for government accountability. "But how does Congress provide oversight for operations they don't know exist?" "That's classified," Emma said with a slight smile. "But I can tell you that appropriate oversight exists at the required levels." Harrison checked his watch and realized they had been discussing classified topics in a public area longer than security protocols should allow. "Ma'am, should we be having this conversation in a more secure location?" "Colonel, everything we've discussed is either already public knowledge or general enough to avoid classification issues," Emma reassured him. "Besides, these gentlemen have now learned the importance of taking every ID seriously, regardless of how ordinary it might appear." Jackson nodded emphatically. "Ma'am, I guarantee that will never happen again. From now on, Every ID gets scanned before any assumptions are made. That's all anyone can ask, Sergeant, Emma replied. Your job is to maintain security, not to recognize every person who might have extraordinary clearance. As Emma prepared to continue to her destination, Chen had one final question. Ma'am, is there anything you can tell us about why someone with your clearance level would need to visit the Pentagon? I mean, couldn't you just have people come to you? Emma paused, considering how much she could reveal. Sometimes the most important meetings happen in the most ordinary places, and sometimes the best way to maintain operational security is to hide in plain sight among everyday military personnel. Brooks realized something that made him uncomfortable. Ma'am, how often do people with clearance like yours pass through our checkpoint without us knowing? More often than you might think, Emma replied. The most effective operators are the ones you never notice. With that, Emma continued through the checkpoint, leaving behind a group of security personnel who would never again make assumptions about the importance of anyone carrying a military ID. After Emma disappeared into the Pentagon's corridors, the checkpoint team stood in stunned silence, processing what they had just experienced. Did that really just happen? Jackson asked, still staring at his scanner display. Gentlemen, you just met someone who operates at levels of government that most people don't even know exist, Harrison explained. And the fact that she was willing to patiently explain some of those realities means you encountered someone with both extraordinary authority and exceptional character. Chen closed her notebook, recognizing that most of what she had witnessed couldn't be included in any official report. This changes everything I thought I knew about how government actually operates. Brooks shook his head in amazement. And to think, we almost made her wait in the visitor line. Which would have been the correct protocol, Harrison reminded them. The fact that she didn't use her authority to bypass normal procedures shows the kind of professionalism that earns Phoenix-level clearance. Jackson looked at his scanner one more time before processing the next person in line. I guarantee I'll never dismiss anyone's ID again, ever. That's probably the most important lesson you could learn, Harrison agreed. In this building, you never know who might be carrying authorization that could change the course of history. As the checkpoint returned to normal operations, each person who had witnessed Emma's revelation carried with them a new understanding of the hidden depths of American national security operations and a profound respect for the extraordinary people who serve in roles that will never be publicly acknowledged.